Ron Klain, thank you so much for joining me tonight. I know you have a very busy schedule on. You've known the man for decades. How did Joe Biden change and become this president signing landmark progressive legislation in his first 50 days? Some people say it was thanks to you. Others say it was pressure from Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren. Others say it was the pandemic plus the experience of being burned by Republicans during the Obama years. What explains this new, different Joe Biden?
Well, I just fundamentally disagree, Maddie, with that read-in. I mean, Joe Biden has always been a fighter for working people. He's always been a fighter for people who are in trouble. He's always been a fighter for people who need help. And, of course, what we face now is one of the most grave situations we've seen in this country, really since the Great Depression. Record levels of unemployment, obviously the great consequences of the pandemic, food lines miles long. So what President Biden, but previously Senator Biden, Vice President Biden, what Joe Biden has always believed is in rising to the moment and to doing what the government needs to do to help those people in need. And as you say, we may disagree on the premises here, but I think we agree on the fact that the American Rescue Plan is a solution that comes to the moment and is a solution that really helps deal with the crises we face in this country right now.
Yes, we do agree on that, even if we differ on how we evaluate Joe Biden's journey to this point. Personally, I've gone from believing Biden would be Hillary Clinton Mark II, a status quo president, to now thinking, wow, he could actually be another LBJ, at least domestically. But as you know, Ron, the LBJ's Great Society, as I mentioned a moment ago, featured permanent progressive victories. Medicare, Medicaid, which are still with us more than 50 years later. The $3,600 child tax credit is a radical policy. But it expires in a year. It's temporary, and there's no point halving child poverty only for a year. So is the White House going to be pushing to make it permanent before it expires?
We're certainly going to work for that, Maddie. Look, some provisions of this bill are temporary by design, are designed to deal with the immediate crises around the pandemic. And, of course, the extension of unemployment insurance. Obviously, we're hoping to get people back to work. That's the goal. But as you say, some of the policy in it hopefully lays a groundwork for what follows. And, of course, dealing with the child poverty problem on a permanent basis is an important objective for us. Obviously, doing some of the things the bill does to strengthen the veterans' health system is an important long-run objective. Strengthening small business, job creation, that's an important long-run objective. The other thing I'd say, by the way, that I hope is a permanent change is for the past 4 years at least, we've had an economic strategy as a country that's focused on making the rich richer and hoping that trickles down. Yeah. And I think the fundamental message of the American Rescue Plan is that the economy grows when we help people at the bottom work their way up, and we help people at the middle grow from the middle out. And that's really the philosophy that this legislation captures.
Yeah, the studies are pretty clear. You're looking at a 20% boost for some of the poorest Americans in terms of income as a result of this legislation. That's undeniable and very welcome. One thing progressives are deeply disappointed by, though, as you know, Ron, was the absence of the $15 minimum wage from the American Rescue Plan. It was taken out by the Senate parliamentarian, and the White House didn't fight that. So will we see a separate minimum wage bill being pushed by the president this year, 2021?
Maddie, we're definitely going to push for the minimum wage. We're in the fight for 15. We're obviously disappointed that it got pulled out of this on a parliamentary point. We actually thought we had a way to get the minimum wage raised. It hadn't been raised for decades, raised in the first 50 days. That would have been really quite incredible. But we are going back at it to try to find a legislative strategy to get the votes together to pass the minimum wage. We'll be starting to work on that this week at the White House. We're going to talk to our allies on Capitol Hill, our allies in the broader fight for 15, and try to figure out how we line up the votes and how we move it through the legislative process.
So let's talk about that legislative process and some of the blocks and obstacles you face, in one in particular. For black Americans especially, to secure democracy and justice, I think we can both agree they need H.R. 1, the voting rights bill passed by the House, and the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act, also passed by the House. They need those bills to pass in the Senate. But the filibuster, the 60-vote requirement that Joe Biden supports, means they won't be passed. And I want you to have a listen to Barack Obama talking about that racist filibuster at John Lewis's funeral last year.
And if all this takes eliminating the filibuster, another Jim Crow relic, in order to secure the God-given rights of every American, then that's what we should do.
Why on the filibuster, Ron, is Joe Biden right and Barack Obama wrong?
Well, you know, President Biden served in the Senate a long time, and he believes that if we could leave the filibuster in place, that's what he prefers. Filibuster is a Senate rule, and the first question is, do senators want to change that rule? Some do. We're going to see how that debate plays out over the next several weeks. Our focus, Mehdi, is on producing progress on whatever rules the Senate put in place. And I do think we want to try to find some bipartisan support for some of these things and try to move them forward. The George Floyd Act is very important. We also need progress, as you said, on voting rights, whether that's the John Lewis Act, H.R. 1, some combination of the two, a lot of proposals coming over from the House. We're going to work closely with the Senate to see what we can do to start to move these proposals forward.
But Ron, that's a great sentiment, but you and I both know the reality. Mitt Romney is the most moderate, reasonable senator in the Republican Party. He says he will never vote for H.R. 1. He thinks it's a disastrous bill. There is no way you get H.R. 1 through with Mitt Romney, let alone 10 Republicans. So the choice facing the Biden administration is, do you support the filibuster or do you support the For the People Act? Which one is it?
Well, obviously, we support H.R. 1, but I think the Senate needs to do some work on H.R. 1. We need to make sure we have the votes in the Senate for H.R. 1. We need to, the Senate just got this bill, I think, last week or the week before. So, you know, there is a legislative process.
51 votes, not 60.
There's a legislative process. There's a legislative process. There's a legislative process that needs to move forward here, Mehdi. We're going to work with the legislative process. We're going to talk to senators. We're going to consult with our Senate Democratic allies and move forward on these important pieces of legislation.
Just to be clear, by my count, 47 odd Democrats either support getting rid of the filibuster or are open to reforming it. Feinstein, Sinema, Manchin support the filibuster, though Manchin has said he might be willing to see some reform to it. You're saying Joe Biden is in that Manchin, Sinema camp, Feinstein camp. Is he open to any kind of reform? Talking filibuster.
You know, Mehdi, again, I think the best way to move forward on the questions of Senate rules is to let the senators work on the Senate rules. What we're working on is producing progress for the American people under whatever set of Senate rules are in place. We've made amazing progress, as you yourself acknowledge, in these 50 days under these Senate rules as they are now. We're going to continue to work to move forward.
Come on, Ron. Ron, let's be clear to our viewers.
Come on, Mehdi, give us credit for what we've done.
You used a budget. I am, and you did it with a budget and reconciliation process. You didn't do it with the filibuster, and that's all I'm saying. I agree. But you used a different rule because you know the filibuster would not have got past the filibuster, the American Rescue Plan. We both agree on that.
What I'm saying, Mehdi, is we have made progress. We're going to continue to make progress. People should measure us by the progress we make.
Okay, and I want you to continue progress. I don't see how you can do that with a filibuster in place, but we can agree to disagree on that. Let's talk about immigration, another big issue you want to get through the Senate, not just a reform bill. Again, you may struggle to get 60, probably will, but also the crisis, what's being described as a new crisis at the border right now. More than 3,200 unaccompanied migrant children are being housed in Customs and Border Protection holding facilities, the highest number ever, and more than half of them have been held beyond the 3-day legal limit. The Associated Press, Ron, is reporting this weekend that children are being held in packed conditions with some sleeping on the floor. Some have to wait 5 days or more to shower. They say your administration is blocking lawyers from accessing those facilities. Look, this isn't family separation. I know that. But it's still an outrage and unacceptable, is it not?
Of course it's an outrage and it's unacceptable. We inherited a government that had allowed the number of beds to safely and humanely house these children, administered by the Department of Health and Human Services, the Office of Refugee Resettlement, had allowed it to shrink to a record low number. So now we have children arriving at these border patrol stations and no facilities, no safe, no legally licensed facilities with legally licensed staff to house the children. And so we are working night and day to increase that capacity that had been allowed to shrink, to create enough safe beds for the children, to create places where they can stay until we can reunite them with relatives here in the U.S. or with safe sponsors for them to stay permanently in the U.S. until they have their asylum hearings. So we inherited a real lack of capacity. It's hard to ramp up that capacity. You can't just take children and put them in a hotel room. They need to be in a place where they are safely protected. They need to be in a place with staff. The staff needs to be trained. The staff needs to be licensed. You know, these are very challenging needs that we are rapidly moving to accelerate. But there's no question at this point in time, we have too many children in these Border Patrol stations.
Exactly. It's the Border Patrol stations that's the issue. HHS facilities are separate. They're not supposed to stay there longer than 3 days. They are. Can you tonight guarantee, because the Justice Department said they wouldn't, the White House didn't respond to AP's requests, can you tonight guarantee on this show to our audience that the White House will allow lawyers to access those border protection holding facilities to check on those kids who haven't showered for 5 days?
Mehdi, I'm unfamiliar with that issue. I can tell you I will look into it tomorrow morning and see why there's any problem with lawyers having access to children in Border Patrol stations.
I hope you can, because it is a big issue. I have to ask a couple of last questions before we run out of time. I know you're very busy. On foreign policy, Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen said last month, and I quote, "Those involved in the abhorrent killing of Jamal Khashoggi must be held accountable." We know, thanks to the Biden administration, thanks to you, declassifying the CIA's intelligence, that MBS, the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, was behind that killing. And yet you haven't held him accountable. Why?
Well, so let's be clear. As you said, we finally, long overdue, released the report that pointed the finger clearly at MBS as being responsible for that. And we have reset our relationship with Saudi Arabia. We've recalibrated that relationship very much. We've imposed sanctions on his elite force that conducted this event. We imposed sanctions on high-level officials in Saudi intelligence. It's been our government's longstanding policy not to personally sanction heads of state, leaders of government in countries where we have diplomatic relations.
He's not
Why?
the head of state,
because
though.
we need to
Ron, he's not the head of state.
He's a very senior government official, and we need to work with the Saudis to solve problems like the crisis we have in Yemen. So we have to balance the desperate needs for accountability here, which we have taken important steps on, for this horrible, ghastly, awful, inexcusable crime, with also, unfortunately, our needs to work with the Saudis on challenges like the problem we have in Yemen right now.
And I wish I could talk more about this. So much I want to ask you, but we're almost out of time, and I do need to get the White House position on a big domestic story. Governor Andrew Cuomo in New York. Senator Chuck Schumer, majority leader, has called for him to resign over multiple allegations of sexual misconduct. Does President Biden agree with Senator Schumer?
What the president said is that there's a process. These charges are very serious charges. They ought to be investigated, and that process ought to run its course. And, I think it's up to the people of New York about Governor Cuomo's continuing ability to govern there. But right now we're focused on making sure that women who brought these serious charges are heard, they have a right to be heard, and that the investigative process that Attorney General James has underway is allowed to move forward.
Okay. So no resignation call. We're 20 seconds left, but I have to ask you, the Chief of Staff of the White House, who are you most like? Leo McGarry from West Wing, Cyrus Bean from Scandal, or Doug Stanhope?
Mehdi, I don't know. I just go to work every day and try to do my job, trying to make sure that what Joe Biden wants to happen in the White House happens. And I don't know. I don't have a good answer on that one.
No, I had to try. We appreciate you taking time out. Thank you so much, Ron Klain, White House Chief of Staff.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank all of you out there.
Thank you as always.
Thanks to at home.
Thanks for watching.
Thank you so much for letting us into your homes during these extraordinary times.